All right, so let's talk about what could have happened differently.
Yeah.
Like so you and I got the whole world figured out, but in terms of the steps that we need to take.
Well, let's hit Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, and then I will go off of that and tell you how something might have played out differently with that applied. So, for by grace are you saved. So by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So by grace and grace alone are these saved. I want to just go with that for a moment. By grace and grace alone are these saved, not by works. With that, and then you take that with the police officer's stated force of being a peacemaker, blessed are the peacemakers. What you have is a perspective that's going, what's happening here is this person's negative works don't make them less eligible for a gracious occupation of grabbing. In other words, their perspective is a little bit different. Instead of mission-based, it's person-based. And it's not just person-based for the people they're after. It's person-based for everyone in the situation. They want grace applied to the people in the car who are doing the criminal acts. They want grace applied to the hostage. They want grace applied to the people on the road. So they're seeking a solution. They're not removing their responsibility. They're pursuing, they're doing all these things, but their perspective is based around this structure that is least collateral damage. And you can only have least collateral damage by having the most options to choose from. And you can only have the most options to choose from if you're constantly resetting the table with grace. Because if every moment you're able to say, okay, fuck it, fuck it. Okay, I know what you just did. You robbed the jewelry store. You got a guy. You got a fucking gun on him. I understand it. Fuck it, though. Like, if you can do that, all the options are on the table. If you don't do that, you go to shoot out tires in the middle of rush hour on the interstate using human shields as cars because you're mission-based oriented. You're not able to say, fuck it.
All right, so cops will often respond to that kind of criticism by saying, well, we got to make split-second decisions. You weren't there. And to be fair, a lot of times cops are put into a situation where they don't really have any good options.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that these guys had a moment of thought that maybe these guys they don't deserve to die, then it wouldn't have been quite the shootout at the OK Corral, and then none of the innocents would have died either.
Yeah, basically what grace does is it puts all the options on the table. If you look at the Last Supper portrait, you see a full table spread. And basically, something about that is to say that, before grace, everyone's just going to try to eat all conditioned into their food. It's going to be every man for themselves. But grace at the table lets you choose from all the options. And when you look at a police officer, if you have to have one thing baked into your brain, what should be baked into your brain is taking a moment to grant grace for whatever's about to occur in the interaction. Because the only way to have all the options around you is to grant grace for yourself if you fuck up before you fuck up, and to grant grace for the other person if they're fucked up before they even fuck up further, and then to do it again after, and then hope that the result is the best, because Lord knows, and I know that might sound crazy, but trust me, that is a better result than thinking you have to shoot out tires on the interstate during rush hour, because if you don't, the guy gets away. They're trying to end something so quickly, they don't think about what's all around them. And the only way to think about what's all around you is to, really quick, just tell yourself, fuck it. Let's just set this up, man. Y'all don't have nowhere to go. Let's talk about this.
You mentioned that, and I'm looking at the word boast in that quote. I hope that there aren't too many people in this world that indulge that on purpose in these situations. But I fear that might be part of it.
It's a structural boast right now. And I think that that's an important distinction. And I think that you could actually look at, so the structural boast it's a hierarchical classification system. So criminal and police officer. So the police officer can boast their title, and they have a certain kind of structure around how they handle these situations around that boastfulness. They don't even realize it's boastfulness because it's just baked into that kind of classificational structure that's been there. And then the criminal, they have them on a different notch because of that same kind of structure. I'm not saying this is all police officers, because many police officers are capable of individual thought, but as a structural kind of policy-based thing, you see that relationship existing.
You know, and if it's a split-second situation, very often those are the things that come out.
Absolutely.
And you know, a lot of cops and the military have said this too. Like, your survival can depend on your training, on your reflexes. A lot of these guys have been trained overseas. Suppressing Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, or even occupying them for a long periods of time, and they end up sort of seeing everybody around them as like this enemy combatant.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Well, I mean, I always used to. Well, I wouldn't want me to be around in that dynamic because I'm so quick trigger to like a spider crawling on my leg. You wouldn't want me around that. But in other words, you have to have some humility about yourself to even know what you're capable of to begin with. And a lot of the structure built into these classifications, so like police officer classification, criminal, the structure baked in is to hide those humilities. It's to mask them with this falsified grandiosity. Like, but I mean, both on the criminal side when you get street cred, and on the police officer side when you put fake dope on someone who's not even a drug dealer and get another fucking person on your belt and you get another, conviction. So you've got two structures built in to hide the humility and amplify the false grandiosity. So that becomes a major conflict when you're talking about classifying things, to get those two things together when you find yourself on the interstate in rush hour.
And we know they plant evidence. That's what's annoying. And as far as that goes, because of the way the situation went down, there's no way they can go back and fix their credibility on this.
The thing is, you can't. The structure is flawed in general. I mean, all of us. But the structure has to be willing to admit it's flawed, or it's inherently flawed. So, in other words, a problem with the police force and their policies as it sits is they do oftentimes have blanket statements. It's very, 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 very rare they admit any fault within 24 hours of a dynamic. And then even when they do admit fault, it's much later and it's very quiet and it's very low key. It's very rare you have those high profile things. So they should be more willing to admit flaws, and because that's how you make improvements. And so their main flaw is their unwillingness to admit flaw, and that unwillingness keeps the cyclical process going. Because truly, as it sits, if police are waiting for criminals to be more kind, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, they're going to be waiting. Mr. Fuller put it this way: the worst mistake is outlawing mistakes.
Absolutely, and I would say that that's exactly what's gone on with the policies in the police force and in politics in general for some time. But I mean, it's on both sides, even on the Hill, right? I mean, in Republican, they've really fostered a narcissistic culture inside of the world, politics and police and just government in general. Like all day long, and I can speak from experience of this. Publicly, they are, saying the other one's definitively wrong, but privately, they go to dinner together. I mean, and I've been at those dinners. It should be the other way around. It should be you're publicly getting along and privately fighting. If you're truly representing, a willingness. So you have to look at where these structures are baked in and why they exist in the way they do, because that's what the police force is built on, right? Those people who make those decisions for conflict. So,
and the whole point of having a police force is because we're assuming that there's going to be people in society making mistakes.
Exactly. So the doctrine of grace, which I kind of, me, kind of skewed away from, but the doctrine of grace allows for mistakes. And by having it baked into the culture, into the methodology, it leaves more opportunity. Now, here's what people won't comprehend maybe. You're still going to have the bad things happen. So it's very likely the doctrine of grace applied in the UPS situation still leaves a dead hostage. Might even leave a dead hostage and two dead criminals. But the doctrine of grace would not have left the two bystanders shot. And I mean that sincerely because the doctrine of grace would not allow a person applying it to go behind innocent bystanders' cars. Everyone involved already might have still died, but the innocent bystanders would not have been brought in the manner they were if the doctrine of grace were applied. It's highly unlikely anything major happens at that point on the interstate if the doctrine of grace is applied. So those cars just have a really cool story to tell their kids, or a scary story to tell their kids later. But instead, they're dead. And they're dead because doctrine of grace isn't applied. Because if you do doctrine of grace, you're not going to get by an innocent bystander. You're going to grant grace and open up the table of options. And that table includes what? We don't have to shoot his tires out now. We can let this person still drive. We don't have to, we can shout out to try to talk to him. We can try to make sure everyone's okay. They didn't apply any of these options because they didn't realize they had them. There was conditioned brain.
And you know, I think it really is mostly conditioning, especially when you're around everybody else and all has the same conditioning. I think a lot of these guys get sort of put on an automatic pilot.
Absolutely.
It makes it very difficult to have that sort of considered response.
So, and I know we're at 32 minutes, so we can kind of cut it close to here. I believe that we don't have as many true choices as we really think we do, but we do have the most important choice. And so you're right, they're on autopilot a lot. And that autopilot's going to run based on what they put into it. And so if they allow, so police officers in this analogy, the policy of the department to be what's put into that auto function, they're going to do it regardless of if it's the right thing or not. But if they place into their auto function this different way of doing it where they think of the whole scope, they apply grace, say, fuck it, fuck it, what they just did. I'm just going to look at him as a human being, not a criminal for this moment in time, just to try to get him criminally apprehended. It's a paradox, but you have to do it that way. And if they can do that for a moment and place that into their mind, those things will be resolved by themselves because police officers do want to do that. And it also resolves those conflicts for them easier. It actually makes it less hostile both for them internally and externally around them based on what they can control. But when they're in their conditioned brain, it actually amplifies hostility. We see that every day in the videos released, is amplified hostility.
And the cops that I know, and I don't know that many, the cops and the ex-cops I know, none of them ever really wanted to see innocents harmed. They really did want to do the right thing. There's a certain lack of self-control that I think happens at some level.
I had a friend who had to leave the force because of that, what you just talked about, an observation of himself that he was not going to be able to turn it off in terms of that auto function you're putting there. He couldn't turn it off. I mean, that's the exact way he would describe it. And so he had to leave the force. And that, look, the thing is, nothing's going to work unless there's this back and forth reflective grace relationship. Because if you do that, you're able to handle things more appropriately. You have to be willing to make a mistake. You can't be willing to make a mistake unless you're willing to forgive yourself for making a mistake. Then you can actually make a mistake. And then if you make a mistake, it's cool because you forgave yourself and you can learn from it. But this inability to do that makes these situations infinitely worse than they need to be.
All right, so one thing that we might bring up, and I don't want to go into it that much because we're long on time. The UPS guys aren't allowed to carry weapons.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's one option. UPS is a gun-free zone. maybe we could rethink that.
Well, I would imagine that the gentleman who was driving that truck did not feel like it was a gun-free zone.
Yeah. The criminals didn't get the message.
Yeah, exactly.
They have a GPS on these things.
Yeah.
And so, maybe the cops just could have held off and not actually escalated. They might have done something to innocents in the street. Yeah, but not when they're driving around 70 miles an hour. They're just trying to get away. And if you follow them, you can wait till maybe they're not completely surrounded by people. When they get, if maybe you blow out the tire from a distance and it throws them on the side of the road. And again, if there's no people, we can take them out.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think the cure might be a gracious anarchy. Another people willing to be gracious but rebuking the negative act.
A gracious anarchy. I'm going to write that down, but we'll have to shoot that at the time. And speaking on that basic idea, another option might be private police. Private police are known for being a lot less aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we just saw these guys get away, but we had the GPS. We make a phone call to the newscasters up in the helicopter, and maybe we have a deal with them that if they help us out in these situations, we kick them an extra $20,000 or whatever.
Well, absolutely. So
you got a lot of just regular folks cooperating in a way that doesn't endanger people.
So there's and you can do 1,000%. I love that. And on top of that, some things we can do. I did this a while back, and I'm going to do it again after a few things get done. That I'm working on, like that's going on right now. But I used to just drop off these donuts or different things to these little radio stations that were local, and then just put a message of saying, just share online that someone gave them that dropped these off for free, no charge. So just basically they would get on the air and say, this guy is whatever they'd say. Someone dropped off these donuts, just said, make sure you say that someone gave us free donuts today. So it was a positive message on the airwaves by the time. It was a positive feeling for the person, and it was a positive message they would put on the airwaves. That actually does a lot for people's mentality when conflict comes up. So if you're able to figure out fun ways to do that for yourself, to just figure out ways to amplify a quick positive message in a moment in the morning. If a person gets pulled over after hearing something that makes that positive response in their brain happen, they're going to have a better response to someone coming up to them than otherwise. So that's a way to handle that a little bit.
And those kind of unusual options, non-instinctual responses, those are the kind of things that can come out if you make that space between the stimulus and the response.
Absolutely. What you're basically trying to do is amplify your good brain as much as possible, and amplify because your good brain knows to breathe more. Your good, what I mean by my good brain is my intentional brain. My intentional brain understands I need to breathe before response. My responsive brain thinks I need to respond before I breathe. So if I follow my responsive brain, I'm going to die quickly because I won't ever breathe because my responsive brain thinks I need to respond before breathing. My intentional brain reminds me I must breathe before response. So if you live in the intentional brain, you're able to have a lot more better outcomes, period. And you'll be a lot happier, generally speaking.
Absolutely.
So,
all right, we should end it.
Yep, cool.
That's a good note. The positive outcomes come from the intentional living.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common message. Let's hope we never see this kind of thing again. This is a giant shit show.
Well, and I know we need to get up. I do want to say this as I messaged you. This reminded me of something that I think in another time when you talk about the Boston Massacre, it started over snowballs, right? It started over snowballs. So we should not put up with this as a people ever. Because if any car in person is a human shield at any time, then we are all capable of being used in that manner as long as we accept it for any person. And so
that's the banality. That's that disregard for everything that matters. I mean, but at least the jewelry's safe.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and we'll talk on that next time because we don't have time. But there's been a paradoxical relationship between where we've started idolizing things, whether on many different levels, as opposed to relationships. If you have a better idolization of relationship, you're not going to do that. They're worried about the mission, the merchandise, all these other things that aren't the relationship of the people who are in the situation. So we'll talk on that next time.